Greer was halfway through the slide on Q3 margins, in a glass conference room with 11 people in it, including 2 executives who'd flown in for this, when she turned to me for the number and said, "And that's holding steady, right, babe?" The word landed in the middle of the table like a dropped glass. For about 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. Greer's hand froze on the clicker. Somewhere, a laptop fan was the only sound in the building. I watched 11 faces run the same small piece of arithmetic at the same moment, and I watched Greer realize what she'd said about half a second after the rest of us did, and go the specific shade of white a person goes when their own mouth has filed something with no authorization. "Revenue," she said, far too fast. I meant, the revenue's holding steady. Nobody bought it. I'll tell you what happened after the meeting. But first you have to understand how 2 people can spend 4 years being basically married as a joke and never once check whether it was one. My name is Nate Brennan. I'm 35, and I'm a financial analyst, which means I spend my days building models that turn a company's hopes into a spreadsheet and then gently inform everyone the spreadsheet disagrees. I'm the guy who finds the number that doesn't tie out. I reconcile. I balance things. Hand me an account in chaos and I'll sit with it until every cent is where it belongs and the 2 columns finally agree. Because I cannot rest until they do. I'm very good at this, and it has never once worked on my own life. Greer Donnelly and I had been a unit for 4 years. She ran the projects and the rooms. She could charm a furious client into renewing a contract she'd just told him was going up in price, and I ran the numbers underneath her. And somewhere in the first year, we'd fused into the thing every office has and pretends is normal: the work spouses. We finished each other's sentences in meetings. We had a shared shorthand nobody else could parse. People said it out loud. Ask the Brennan Donnellys, or Mom and Dad are fighting again whenever we bickered over a forecast. It was a joke. We leaned into the joke. The joke was load-bearing, and I never once asked what it was holding up. We had a notebook. One notebook, green cover gone soft at the corners, that came to every meeting and lived on whichever of our 2 desks had seen it last. The front of it was real work. Figures, action items, the bones of every forecast. The margins were ours, a running tally of how many times the VP said synergy, tiny terrible doodles. 1-word jokes only the 2 of us could decode. We passed it back and forth across conference tables for 4 years like notes in the back of a classroom. It was the most honest thing either of us owned, and we disguised every true thing in it as a gag. Here's the lie I'd like to flag. I told myself it was platonic, because it was convenient, because she was the best colleague I'd ever had. And the math was simple. You do not blow up the best working relationship of your career over a feeling you can refuse to name. So I refused to name it. For 4 years I ran a perfectly reconciled professional life, and one account I never opened. Because I already knew the books wouldn't balance, and a man who balances things for a living will do almost anything to avoid a column that won't tie out. It was the biggest meeting of our year. A quarterly review in front of the 2 executives who decided whose projects lived and whose quietly didn't, held in the glass room on the good floor. The one with the long table and the whole city standing behind it. Greer had been up until who knows when polishing the deck. I'd rebuilt the margin model twice to make sure every figure would survive a hostile question. We were a machine. We'd done this 100 times. I sat in my usual seat, 1 chair to her left, the green notebook open between us. And when she reached the slide where she always tossed me the hard number, she turned. And instead of my name, the wrong word came out. You already know the word. I'm not going to relive the 3 seconds. What I'll tell you is what they did to the room. How you could watch the entire team arrive at a conclusion they'd been not quite holding for 4 years. How one of the executives raised an eyebrow a precise 2 millimeters. How Greer's recovery, I meant the revenue, was the least convincing sentence I have ever heard out of the most convincing person I know. We finished the meeting. The numbers held. Nobody remembered the numbers. In the elevator afterward, we were alone, and neither of us looked at the other. Greer stared at the floor indicator like it owed her money. I held the green notebook flat against my chest like a shield. The doors opened on our floor and she said, "To the hallway, and not to me." That was nothing. "I'm tired. I've been calling everyone babe lately. I called the barista babe this morning." "Sure," I said. "I did," she insisted, to a spot just past my shoulder, and then walked very fast to her desk. For the rest of the day, the notebook stayed shut on mine, and she did not come get it, which, in 4 years, had never once happened. We had never gone a full afternoon without that notebook crossing the 3 feet between our desks. The 3 feet had never felt like a distance before. It did now. I went home and did the thing I always do with a number that won't sit right. I tried to reconcile it. I told myself a slip is just noise in the data. People misspeak. She was exhausted. The word babe is practically punctuation for some people. She'd said it the way you'd autofill a cell. One data point is not a trend. I built the case carefully, the way I'd defend a forecast to a skeptical VP, and for one evening, it almost held. But I'm an analyst, and the thing about a number that doesn't tie out is that you can ignore it for exactly as long as you can ignore it. Babe wasn't the anomaly. Babe was the one honest entry in 4 years of a ledger I'd been keeping in 2 sets of books. The public set, where Greer and I were colleagues with a funny rapport, and the private set I never let myself open, where every late night and every past note and every inside joke quietly added up to a total I'd refused to calculate. Her mouth had just read out the bottom line of the second ledger in front of 11 people, and the part I lay awake on wasn't that she'd said it. It was that nothing in me had flinched at the word. It had fit. It had tied out, and you cannot unbalance an account once you've watched it balance. The evidence had been in the notebook the entire time. I just never audited the margins. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did the unforgivable thing and read 4 years of it back to front. Most of it was what I remembered: the synergy tally, the doodles, the war we'd waged in tiny letters over whether a hot dog is a sandwich. But salted all through it were entries I'd written off as gags at the time and could not, now, read as anything but a confession delivered in installments. A date circled in the corner of a page from year 1. No label. I checked the calendar. It was the day they'd paired us. A little drawing of 2 stick figures at a conference table with a tiny heart between them that I'd assumed was a joke about the work spouse thing, except she'd drawn it on a random Tuesday with no joke attached to it. And on the last page, recent, scrawled in the margin while I'd apparently been talking, in her handwriting, "He has no idea." I had no idea what I had no idea about. Now I had a guess, and it was keeping me up. The next morning the betting pool surfaced, the way these things do. Marcus from procurement, who keeps a secret the way a colander keeps soup, sidled up to me at the printer and said, "So, is it official now, or?" And when I just stared at him, he laughed and told me half the floor had a pool running back 3 years, that the over-under had been set on a holiday party, and that while I personally owed him nothing, several people were financially invested in your feelings, Brennan. I went back to my desk understanding that I'd been the analyst of a situation everyone but me had correctly modeled years earlier. I balanced numbers for a living, and I had been the only person in a building of 40 who couldn't add 2 and 2 when the 2 and 2 were me. And once the lens flipped, the back catalog reorganized itself. The flu I'd had 2 winters ago, when I'd come in anyway because a board deck was due, and she'd quietly taken half my workload and then stood over my desk at 6 p.m. with her coat on and said, in a voice that left no room for negotiation, that she'd already told the VP I'd gone home. I'd filed that under good teammate. The conference she'd refused to attend the year they tried to send her without me, citing a scheduling conflict that, I now suspected, had not existed. The way she ordered for me at lunches without asking, and was never wrong. 4 years of small accommodations I'd logged as professional courtesy, every one of them quietly subsidizing a balance I'd refused to see. People do not restructure their entire work life around a colleague. They do it around a person. Greer, meanwhile, was running a containment operation. She called 3 separate people babe that morning. Loudly, performatively, a woman establishing an alibi. She rerouted her path to the kitchen so it didn't pass my desk. And then, this is the part that broke the alibi. At 4 o'clock a coffee appeared at my elbow. The right order. No note. Set down while I was on a call, and by the time I looked up she was already gone. The green notebook, which had sat shut between our desks for a day and a half, was back, open to a fresh page, with a single new doodle in the margin, 2 stick figures, drawn slightly closer together than before. No joke attached. It came to a head after everyone else had left. We had a deliverable due, and we were the last 2 on the floor, which we'd been 1,000 times. Except this time the joke that usually filled the air had nowhere to stand. The overhead lights had clicked to half on their timer. The city had gone to lamps in the windows. I was pretending to check a formula. She was pretending to proof a slide. The notebook lay open between us on the table, and neither of us had written in it for an hour. I watched her, across 3 feet that hadn't been a distance until 2 days ago, turn her pen over in her fingers without writing anything, and I thought about the circled date and the stick figures and he has no idea, and I thought about how I'd spent 4 years keeping 2 sets of books precisely, so I'd never have to stand in a quiet office at night and feel exactly what I was feeling, which was the relief of a number finally tying out. The building did the things buildings do at night. The HVAC sighed and cut out. Far off, a vacuum started and stopped. The half-lit floor made the whole open-plan office feel like a held breath. All those empty chairs, the 2 of us at the one table with a lamp still on. I had run 1,000 late nights in this exact configuration and called every one of them work. I let myself, for the first time, simply not call it anything. I looked at her hands, ink on the side of one finger, and I thought, I have memorized those hands the way I memorize a balance sheet, line by line. And I have been pretending. That was diligence. She set the pen down. She looked at the notebook, and not at me. I heard her take the kind of breath you take before you jump off something. I do not, Greer said, to the notebook, call the barista babe. I don't call anyone babe, she went on, still to the page, the words coming faster now that the first one was out. I have never called anyone babe in my life. I called you babe in front of 2 executives and the entire team, because apparently the part of my brain that runs my mouth has known something for about 4 years that the rest of me kept overruling. And on Tuesday, it staged a coup. She finally looked up, her eyes bright and furious, mostly at herself. I've been telling myself you were my work husband as a bit. It stopped being a bit so long ago I can't even find the day it changed. I just know I reach for you before I reach for the number, every single time, and I have for years, and I am so tired of pretending the best part of my job is the job. Everything in me went still. The specific stillness of 2 columns agreeing at last after you've hunted the error for hours. That quiet click when the difference goes to 0. 4 years of refusing to open the account, and here she was reading me the balance herself. I made myself slow down, because she just put something on the table that cost her, and she needed the room to take it back. Greer, I closed the notebook gently, the way you set down something breakable. You don't have to mean this. We had a weird week. You said a word. The whole office turned it into a thing. If you want, it was a slip and a long Tuesday. And tomorrow, we ask the Brennan Donnellys to forecast Q4 and nothing changes, and I keep the best working partner I've ever had. I'm not going anywhere either way. The door's right there. I won't be hurt. And I won't make a single meeting weird. You just have to tell me which one you want. I gave her the door. It mattered that the most decisive person I knew get to make this one decision slowly, with no clock running on it. She didn't take it. She reached across the 3 feet that had stopped being a distance and put her hand flat on the closed notebook. Over mine. I don't want the door, Nate. I've been reaching across this exact table for 4 years. I'm not pulling my hand back now, just because somebody finally heard me say it out loud. So I told her the true thing, and I didn't reach for "I love you." Because she'd built an entire career out of seeing through a slick line, and she deserved the audited version. You're the only account I was ever scared to open, I said. I reconcile everything. It's the one thing I'm actually good at. Sitting with the mess until both sides agree. And I never once let myself add you up, because I already knew what the total was, and I knew the day I let myself see it I'd never be able to go back to pretending you were just the person I sat beside. I kept 2 sets of books for 4 years to avoid one number. Greer, it's you. It's been you since the day somebody circled on that page in year 1. I just needed your mouth to say it before my whole life would balance. I turned my hand over under hers. And for the record, you can call me babe in every meeting from here on. I'll allocate it. She laughed, a real one, startled out of her, and it cracked straight into something wetter. And she came around the corner of the table, and I stood to meet her. And I cupped the side of her face, slow, leaving all the room in the world for her to stop. And she didn't. And we kissed in the half-lit office, with the green notebook shut under both our hands, 4 years late and exactly on schedule. And then, the motion sensor lights, which had given up on us an hour earlier, decided the conference room next door was finally empty and shut off with a loud industrial clunk, and the sudden dark made us both jump and laugh against each other's mouths. Somewhere down the floor, a Roomba the night crew had set loose, bumped the glass door, and beeped in protest. "We have to go," she said into my collar, grinning. "The robot needs the floor." It was the least romantic sentence available to her, and it was perfect, because it was hers, and because she said it without letting go. We told HR the following week, which is the least romantic sentence in the English language and also a thing 2 responsible adults do. Marcus from procurement won the pool, and he bought the whole floor donuts with his winnings, which I calculated left him at a net loss, and I have never seen a man happier to lose money. 3 months later, not much had changed, which is exactly how I knew it was real and not the slip. We still forecasted Q4 together. We still kept the green notebook, though the margins had stopped pretending. She still ran the rooms. I still found the number that didn't tie out. The office mostly stopped calling us the Brennan Donnellys, partly because it had quietly shifted from a joke into a prediction, and predictions make an accountant nervous in the best possible way. A year after that, I did something with a number I'd never done in my professional life. I stopped checking it. We were on her couch and she called me babe, on purpose this time. No meeting, no audience. And instead of running it through a single one of my models, instead of asking whether it tied out, I just let it sit there between us, true and unexplained, The way she'd been letting me sit beside her for years before I'd had the nerve to do the math. Years later, when people ask how we got together, she says she proposed to me by accident in front of 2 executives, which is not what happened, but is, I'll admit, the better story. I say it took a Freudian slip and a betting pool to audit something everyone but me had already closed the books on. But the version I keep is the quiet office, the notebook shut under both our hands, the moment 4 years of a figure I refused to calculate finally went to 0. The room going dead silent was never the disaster. It was the sound of the truth clearing its throat. It wasn't sudden. It had probably always been her. 3 feet across a conference table. 4 years of a joke I never once checked. It just, one Tuesday, said the quiet part with the whole team watching. So tell me, what would you have done if the person you'd sat beside for years called you babe in front of the entire room and then swore she calls everyone that? Would you have let her keep the alibi, the way I almost did? Or would you have stayed late and waited for the real number? And have you ever called something a joke for so long that you forgot to notice the day it turned true? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. If this one tied something out for you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.